Well, thank you so much, Coach Walters. So happy for you to be with me on the WaveCapital's guest speaker series on relationship building in a team environment. And you're my guest today. And, wanted to get your insights. You played in the NBA for 7 years. You went to the University of Kansas, played for Hall of Fame coach Roy Williams, someone who I've had the pleasure to meet several years ago as well. And, wanted to know and learn about your ideas about relationship building, with the coaches that you've worked with, the teams that you've coached on. So we'll begin. How would you define relationship building, Coach Walters?
Well, I think relationship building starts in the first discussion, the first time you meet that young man or young woman, and really establishing what you're about, finding out about what they're about, and then seeing if there's a common ground as a coach to help them achieve their goals. I mean, I was always really upfront and honest. I wanted to talk about my intentions and my goals and plans for them. So that's where I wanted to start the relationship. And then every time you get a chance to spend time with them, and you have to spend time with them, go to lunch, which at the time when I first started, you couldn't do that, and towards the end of my career, you could go to lunch, you could spend time. So you have to do that. You have to invest in that, because the more you invest, the more you get to know all of the idiosyncrasies, their journey, their life. It just gives more substance to the relationship, so that when you do coach them, they understand it's coming from a place of good. So, that's how I see how you're going to build a relationship with a young man or young woman in a work environment, in a team environment.
And talking more about that, characteristics, attributes, leadership qualities, what have you seen as a former player and going up your time at Northwestern and University of Kansas and all the NBA teams you played for now? I mean, have there been commonalities, that you've seen over the years? Have things changed? I know that the game of basketball has evolved tremendously. Maybe you can talk specifically about what leadership qualities, characteristics, and attributes that have stood out to you.
Well, I think the first thing when you're talking about players is them having an understanding of who they are and where they're weak, where they're strong, how to play to their greatness, how, and how they're going to get there. They can look at themselves and they understand that they have things that they need to work on. They understand that there's going to be a sweat equity that they need to invest in themselves, but also in their teammates. Being a leader at a high level takes a lot of things. I mean, usually when your best player is your best leader, you have a chance to have real success. And if you look at the great organizations, the great teams, the teams that have won championships, that's usually who they have. They have a personality, they have a leadership quality, they have a player that has a work ethic and a willingness to invest in his teammates. You talk about LeBron James is a great one. Tim Duncan is a phenomenal example of that. Michael Jordan, as we watched The Last Dance, you see that was an evolving thing for him, because he was the hardest worker. He was the most dynamic personality, and his leadership style was very abrupt and in your face. So you have to, as an organization, put players around him that can handle that leadership style, because there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. I've played for Chuck Daly, I played for Pat Riley, I played for Larry Brown, I worked for Stan Van Gundy. Every single one of them had a different personality and had a different leadership style and a relationship building style as well. So as an organization, as a team, when you're a college coach, you are the organization. You're the one trying to put the team together. So you have to make sure that you have really good leadership, but also guys that can handle leadership as well. And that's part of, again, the relationship you build with that player. You have to learn about that young man and the young men that are going to be following his lead and your lead. So that's why the relationship part of it is so important.
Absolutely. And you mentioned so many amazing coaches, Larry Brown, and you've mentioned, Pat Riley, and you see a picture of me and Michael Jordan, and I had a pleasure of meeting him back in 2005. And I was reading articles online, the times that you would face MJ, and, you would wear number 23. That was your favorite number. I played basketball up until, high school. I wore 23, had the chance to perhaps walk on at the collegiate ranks, but I wanted to focus more on academics. at the time, but I've always been a fan of the game. Talk about, and I love The Last Dance. I mean, who doesn't, love The Last Dance? You learn so much about the relationship building amongst people like Michael and Scotty, and then, Dennis and how he folded into things. And then, big guys like, Steve Kerr and John Paxson hitting key crucial shots in playoff games to win championships. Talk about, when you think about the coaches you played for. I interviewed Del Harris just the other week for the speaker series, and you played for him on one of the games that I'd love for you to highlight. Each coach that you've played for, and maybe highlight some of the teammates that you've played with. What things did you learn about relationship building? Any specific anecdotes that you'd like to share?
Well, I think the first thing, and I played for Dell and give him my best. That he helped me get drafted at a higher level. I was at the Desert Classic and he was my coach. And the one thing I think the biggest thing that's really, really important for all great leaders, you got to know what the heck you're doing. Okay. I mean, that's the biggest thing. And you have to make sure that your players understand through your actions, not through your words. You can't tell a kid, just listen to me, it's going to work out. You have to show them every single day in your work ethic, in your preparation, in your detail, that you can truly help them achieve things that they aspire to, but also maybe they don't know they're capable of. I think that's the biggest thing. And every great coach, like I didn't sit there and have long conversations with Pat Riley, Larry Brown, Chuck Daly, but the one thing they all had is I believe they could help me be better. And I think that's the biggest thing as a leader is you got to help them believe. You got to make them believe through your actions. Yeah, your words are part of your actions, but that they can help you achieve goals that you want to achieve. And I think that's the biggest thing. And it's not always, nice, touchy, feely, pat on the back. Sometimes it's hard, but you have to make sure, and great leaders all have this. They make you believe you can be great. They make you believe that you can achieve great goals. And every single great coach that I had, and I've had a lot of great coaches, they help you believe that. And the ones that didn't, and I won't ever name any name, but the ones that made me feel like they didn't believe that I could get it done, or I didn't believe that they could help me become what I wanted to be, to me, that wasn't great leadership. And I failed as a leader. Sometimes the message doesn't get conveyed in the way you want it to, and you have to look at yourself as a leader. Well, what could I have done better? What can I learn from this situation? How am I going to progress and move forward so that these things don't happen again? But yes, all of those coaches had that. Stan Van Gundy has that. When you spend time with those people, you believe in their work ethic, you believe in their plan, their detail, their organization, and what they have for you and for the team to truly achieve great things.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, and you've alluded to this, that, some coaches stand out more than others. What was your thought process when you were at Northwestern and you were thinking, hey, I might want to transfer, and you did, to the University of Kansas? Talk about your relationship with Coach Williams.
Well, Coach Williams was very cut and dry, to be quite honest. He kind of laid it out. And I think other thing great leaders do, they don't promise all these things. It's going to be about work ethic. It's going to be about unselfishness. It's going to be about how you're going to continue to improve and get better each and every day. And are you going to invest in the team? And that's really what he talked about. The whole mantra when it goes back to North Carolina is we're going to play hard, we're going to play smart, we're going to play together. And so that was just stuck in my mind. Like, okay, those three things make a lot of sense. Okay. But he backed it up every single day. He worked extremely hard. He put his golf clubs away when the season started. He was in the gym early. I'd walk in the office. They'd be in staff meetings. There was a very detailed and organized practice plan. When we worked, he invested just as much, if not more than we did, with the amount of film that they watched, the amount of organization. So over time, when you first, college kids, when you're 19, 20, 21 years old, you don't necessarily know what you're getting yourself into. Right. And I didn't when I was getting ready to go. And that's just after 2 years of college. And I had a great coach in Bill Foster. Bill Foster went to Final Fours, was a highly successful coach. I decided to leave Northwestern. I still didn't know what I was getting myself into when I went to Kansas. But the one thing about Coach Williams is I trust his work ethic. I trusted him. There was a thing about him that he had great character, just a trustability when he talked to you. You believed what he said, but then he also backed it up every single day. And me as a player that ended up being one of the leaders on the team that had to learn how to be a leader on that team, it challenged me to be better in those areas, to work harder, get smarter, and then play unselfishly.
Yeah, and I think that, you had the great pleasure to play for him for 2 years, and he was so instrumental in your life. And I got a little brief snapshot of the type of person he is, not only having gone to North Carolina and be a fan of the game and watch a lot of Carolina games, but it was in 2016, it was just several days, maybe not even a week after they lost the buzzer beater against Villanova. And he is with his wife. They're at a restaurant in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. He has a summer home in that area. And, my father and I was with family, and I spotted him. And I think, well, I want to be respectful of his time. And I, walked up to him and say, Coach, went to Carolina, think the world of all your abilities as a coach and what you've done to the game and what you've been to the Carolina fabric and the community. And, he was so humble and so kind and gracious, got a picture with him, and, something that I'll cherish for the rest of my life. But just for those brief moments, asking, who I was and, where I'm from, and, wanting to grab a picture, because you think about after what occurred, that was such a tough loss, but it just speaks to his character that he, it goes beyond basketball. He could, really pick up where he left off, and he's on to the next season, and he's wanting to still, most coaches or most players, after a tough loss, they, want to just have some private time and they want to reflect on the season. But, it just spoke to like the resilience he had. I know it's a lot of resilience. I know it's a lot of genuine nature of, wanting to just still be out there and to be able to know that, hey, we're going to compete, and they end up winning the next year. And I think that, you probably played for a lot of coaches, the resiliency, you have the tough losses, but you have the great wins. So I think that you have experienced that, firsthand. And, when you think about the relationship building that you've probably been a part of, you're Japanese American. Talk about the culture of the sport, how it goes beyond basketball, and how it goes. Do you see yourself as someone who broke, barriers?
Well, I think the first thing, the most important thing that you said was how genuine Coach Williams is. Like I've been fortunate to play for some great coaches, and I put Stan Van Gundy right in this. They're truly genuine people that care about people. It's not about them. They have a servant leadership style. They're about service and putting their players and putting people in position to win, making people feel good about themselves, and yet at the same time holding them accountable at a very, very high level. Regarding me and groundbreaking, I mean, I don't know. I'm half Japanese. I don't look Japanese. I did grow up in the Asian American community. I played, in the Japanese league in San Jose, California, from about 4th grade on. I'm very proud of that. I know my mom, she's from Japan. My father brought her over here when they got married. So I have great pride in the fact that I want to represent her in the right way. I want to make sure that I'm conducting myself, and I fall short a lot. I have a mouth and I have a competitiveness to me, but at the same time, I want to honor, my mother and where she came from. My friends, the people that were in my wedding were guys I grew up with that played in the Japanese league. So I am very proud of that. Hopefully in some small way, other kids that saw me play growing up and saw me play at Kansas and play in the NBA say, hey, a guy with Japanese blood in him can make it. If you look at the women's Japanese team, they're phenomenal. I think they won the silver medal. Hopefully we can get the men's team to continue to grow and build and compete at that level as well. But I do take great pride in that. Hopefully I've done a good job of representing the Japanese American community.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see, Jeremy Lin and what he was able to do with heritage from the Asian communities. And he was able to be very successful at the NBA level. And, you see how the NBA is well represented around the world. And I think that the 92 Dream Team, really, opened basketball beyond just America. And you played in the NBA at that time. I mean, you got drafted right after Kansas, but, you were part of the 90s basketball fabric and how the game really started evolving and taking shape, and the influences, Michael Jordan, but so many other great players, and so many other players like yourself who were able to, make an impact on any team that you played for. And talking to you, it sounds like you got so much out of your time as an NBA player, and how it's made you become a much more successful, person, professionally and personally, and even in the sport. Talk about how you were able to find your way to New Orleans and being an assistant coach for the Pelicans.
It was a great experience. It really was. I learned a lot. I think the one thing, another great point I think you brought up was, Coach Williams, meeting him after losing to Villanova. And there's no victimhood in coaching. Like when you coach in college basketball, when you coach in the NBA and NBA basketball, I mean, those guys are going to lose in the NBA 82 games. You're going to probably lose somewhere between 20 and 40 games a year minimum. Like you don't have time to feel sorry for yourself. You don't have time to beat people down. You have to constantly be working your plan, building guys up, holding guys accountable, and moving on to the next opportunity. And I've taken that same stance. I played 7 years in the NBA, got cut twice. I played overseas for about 2.5 years. I've coached at Florida Atlantic, got a job with San Francisco. After 8 years, I got fired. I kept moving. And right now I'm still trying to get better. I'm trying to get better for myself as a person, as a father, as a husband, as a coach, as a leader. You have to have that. There can't be any victim process in your head. You've got to keep moving and getting better. But New Orleans, I learned a lot. Anytime you have a chance to work for Stan Van Gundy, there's nobody better, in my opinion. I've only worked for one NBA head coach, and that's Stan Van Gundy, so I'm biased. But when you see the plan that he puts out, and with COVID this year, it was a very difficult situation. We only came together for about a week and a half to really put together a plan for our team with a lot of new pieces. And quite honestly, pieces that were still being signed as we were getting ready to start camp and we're in camp. We didn't have our full roster, but yet there was no victim with Stan. He put together a plan. At times he had to adjust the plan, but you could see the great level of detail and work ethic and how he was going to study, film, have discussion with assistant coaches, have discussions with players to really try to put together the best possible system or package he could for the season. And, it's funny, after the season, we got fired, right? We got fired. And quite honestly, there was no victim in Stan Van Gundy. Like it wasn't like, okay, I'm moving on to the next thing. I'm looking for my next opportunity, whatever it may be. I mean, he's 63 years old, so his next plan may be on a boat on Lake Mary, enjoying life. But there was no victim to him, and I think that's a really important part of being a leader. Like those guys are always looking. You think about Joe Montana, who was a great quarterback, and he said the thing he really loved was, and most leaders and most coaches, when you're in the locker room or you're in a huddle, and every single eye is on you, and you have a chance to deliver a message and put together a plan and make guys believe that they can get it done. That's why, it's one of the reasons why I coach. Yes, the locker room after a big win is great too, because you see the celebration, but there can be no victimhood when things don't go your way. You're going to have to move on to the next thing, lick your wounds, figure out the mistakes, figure out how to get better, and let's keep moving forward. Pat Riley used to talk about blind faith. You have to have blind faith. You don't know if it's going to happen, but it's there somewhere. And you've got to keep moving forward as a unit, knowing that it may not work out, but having blind faith that, if we keep doing this, we give ourselves the best chance for success.
And, taking the words of, Pat Riley, blind faith. I mean, if you think about outside of sports, but still utilizing the principles that you learn in sports, and let's think outside the box here. So let's say, for example, you want to start an organization, and it doesn't have to be sports related. When you think about a corporate CEO or an executive leadership team, who is it? Pat Riley? Is it Larry Brown, Roy Williams, Del Harris? Like all these coaches you've mentioned, Stan Van Gundy, who in your mind is instantly you think of who would make a great corporate CEO and why?
Well, I mean, Matt Doherty, Stan Van Gundy, those are two guys that are going to put an awful lot of thought and planning into running an organization. And they're going to only do it if they're really, really passionate about it and believe in what they're doing. But all of them could. Roy Williams would be great but it's the work ethic. It's just different type of work, if that makes any sense. Their passion is, winning championships, winning games, but also building a relationship with players and helping them achieve their goals. They're really inspired by that. It's no different in the corporate world. They're going to put together a plan, and they're going to really research that plan and really come up with, study, talk to others, get other people's ideas. They don't have to necessarily know everything. And they're going to also try to surround themselves with the best possible staff, which I think is really important for leadership. You've got to have guys. Stan was actually the smartest guy in the room, but Bob Byer was really smart too. So he'd always have people in, and he wanted to hear different ideas, and it didn't have to come from the smartest guy in the room. It's amazing how he would listen to something like that makes 100% total sense. And it may have just come from a player that was on the end of the bench. Like he was always listening, always really open about taking direction. But that's what great leadership does. And that's why those guys would be great in a CEO position, because they're going to study, they're going to research, they're going to listen, and then they're going to make people believe in the direction that they're going.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's the thing, you've highlighted Stan Van Gundy a lot, growing up in Florida and living in Tampa, and now I live in Orlando. I know that Stan Van Gundy used to be the Magic coach, took them to the NBA finals against the Lakers. And, they were, made them the second best team. He had Dwight Howard, Jameer Nelson. He had a lot of great players on that team. It just speaks to, and all the coaching assignments he's had as a head coach, and even, his time in basketball and, with his pedigree, I mean, he's always been successful wherever he's been. And to hear you speak so highly of him, it sounds like he's had such a great impact on you, which is, wonderful to hear about. When you think about, players, what former players or current players do you think would make a great corporate CEO and somebody you'd want to work alongside with, running an organization, hypothetically speaking, if it was outside of basketball?
Well, that's a great question. I've worked with a lot of very talented guys that have figured out how to become great at what they do. Wow, when I think of guys that could be great as a business leader, because here's the thing I would say, and that's why coaching, I think, is probably lends more so than maybe a player. And I was a player, so I'm not trying to act like players aren't the smartest guys in the world.
Right.
But coaches, like that's why I named Matt Doherty and Stan Van Gundy and Roy Williams, and because I was around those guys and I could see it was more than just the game to them, if that makes any sense. It was, and they're in a position in their lives at 40, 50, 60 years old, where now they're starting to think about impacting a lot of people as opposed to just impacting themselves and their family. And players, and I don't mean this to come off the right way. In some ways, we're very selfish about, providing for our family, giving our family the best possible life in the world. But then as you get to be 30, 40, 50 years old, you start thinking about the bigger picture. So that's a tough one for me to answer. I have to be around those players a little bit more on where they're at in the world. I've been around some guys that have ended up being great in the corporate world, but I always go back to this and what, like, Roy Williams can talk about anything in a very intelligent manner. He's going to sit down, he's going to read the paper, he's going to watch the news. He wants to know what's going on in the world. And I think that that's really important as a leader, that you have those type of things. Matt Doherty was the same way. And that's why he was such a great recruiter. He could go out and he could talk about a world of different things intelligently. When I'm around basketball players in the locker room, we're talking about basketball. Quite honestly, we're talking about basketball, how we're going to win the next game. So I'm not giving you a great answer, and I'm sure I'm missing out on some guys. But to be a leader in the business world, the margins of error are so small, the margins of victory are so small. I'd have to really, really do my research before I could give you a really great answer on that one.
Well, again, I'd love to have you back on the program, in the future, because, it's great that, after, episode like this, you can be, reflective on, your answers, and then, something might pop in your head and you say, oh, I'd love to talk about that for next time. But no, you gave a great answer. I mean, you talk about the worldliness of, some of these coaches, outside of basketball. If you're, well-read, and, you're a student, not only of the sport. Like,
And I'll say this, and I just thought of one, Jamal Mashburn. Jamal Mashburn's done really well in the business world. If you watched a lot of things about pro athletes, there was something on 30 for 30 on ESPN about how a lot of athletes lose their money. Jamal was someone that was always thinking ahead, always thinking forward, owns car dealerships, has his own business, he's probably making more money now than he was when he was playing, and he was making a lot of money, so he's a guy that was very introspective, always thinking ahead, always planning, and you wouldn't have thought of that for him as a player, because he was a scorer. He was thinking score first, he was thinking isolations, but yet in the business world, I think that he's done a phenomenal job. And so Jamal would be one guy I would say, hey, if I'm going to go into business somebody, that'd be a guy. Kevin Pritchard, who's the GM of the Indiana Pacers, he was always thinking about business opportunities and how he could, make a living outside of basketball. So Kevin Pritchard would be another guy. I never went into business with him, but he was always thinking of ideas and how I can make this work for me, my family, and the people that work for me.
Yeah, and those are the great answers. And I remember, growing up watching Jamal Mashburn play, and, what a great player. And I know that, he played for the Heat, he played for the, played for the Hornets.
He was at the Hornets, yeah. He's a good player. He's a good player, really smart guy, and probably misunderstood because he was such a great scorer, and he got labeled as kind of just a scoring guy, but very, very intelligent, very thoughtful, and has done really, really well in the business world.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And when you think about the European, culture over there, and the game of basketball, how was it different than playing in the NBA?
A lot different. They spend a lot more time working on their fundamentals and their skill. That's the one thing that really, and their system is totally different. Their good players don't play in their high school system. Their good players don't play in a college system. They play for their club team in that city, in that area, and they can be moved to other club teams. But it would be like Monday through Friday. You'd wake up, you'd practice around 9, 10 o'clock. You'd have a thing called siesta in Spain. You'd go home, take a nap, and you'd come back at night, and then you'd practice. So we'd spend a good 2 hours in the morning working out, working on skill, working on our passing, handling, ball handling, shooting, different parts of the fundamental game. And then at night we'd play and scrimmage and really practice. And that's why the international game, if you look at a lot, guys like Luka, some great international players, they're really skilled. They really pass, handle, and shoot at a high level. And a lot of that's because of the time that they put in, and just the international system so different. Whereas we're putting more emphasis on individual athleticism, ability to get to the basket, ability to kind of put on a show a little bit, as opposed to the team game and the fundamentals of the game. So, and quite honestly, your younger players are learning from older players. When you're a high school player, the highest level you'll play against probably is going to be a 12th grader if you're in 9th grade. And when you get to college, you're only going to play against other college players. Well, overseas, I was 30 years old working out with 18, 19, and 20-year-olds and helping them develop their game. So it's just a completely different system that's very, very efficient.
Right. And would you say, like, your relationship building from the standpoint of that, of the nature of the podcast, relationship building and team environment with the teams that you played on, overseas, was the relationship building a little bit different, or not so much compared to here?
It's really funny when you talk about, like, basketball, and even in college. So you have to really pick your spots in a college setting and even in the NBA setting, because here's the thing. you've got about 30 minutes to an hour before practice where guys are getting kind of ready to get ready for practice. Then you practice anywhere from 30, 45 minutes to 2 hours based on the time of the year and what your schedule's at. And then you got about another 30, 40 minutes right afterwards where you're getting loose, you're getting your stretch, you're getting your treatment. Then you're kind of out of there. So you've got to be really, really good as a coach. You have to be good as a player to build that relationship, because once you leave the gym, especially in the NBA, you're like 13 to 17 different corporations. Guys aren't doing a whole lot of hanging out with each other. So the impact you have in the time that you have in a sport is really important to take advantage of every single one of those opportunities. And you don't always know when they're coming from. So that's why I have so much respect for the coaches that I worked for, because they really valued the amount of time that we had, and it was very purposeful, if that makes any sense. I think in the corporate world, you probably have a little bit more time because it's 9 to 5 and there's a little bit more time, but guys are putting their work in, getting to their desk. But when you have an opportunity, whether it's a lunch, whether it's beforehand, the communication that you have with them, it's really important in making them believe in, hey, this is the plan, this is where we're going, and this is how we're going to get there, and making them believe in it. So, and it's the same thing overseas. I didn't hang out a lot with the guys when the practice was over in Spain. I didn't. It was siesta. I was going to go home. I would be with my family. But the time that you have to make the most of it. And you have to have like really purposeful intent as to what you're trying to get accomplished as a team. And that's why it's so important. The people that you bring into your organization, it's so important as well, because you're not going to change 18 to 22 years of how they've been raised, how they've been brought up, and how they think. It's really hard to change those things. You got to be really smart about who you're going to bring into your organization as well.
Absolutely. And even outside a corporate environment, when you think about, small businesses and entrepreneurship and the creativity in that regard, I mean, I think that when it comes to relationship building, there's no one way of doing it. Each process could be unique of how a coach wants to build players on their teams. And there's so much creativity to it. Could you talk about some of the creative methods maybe you saw, coaches instill on teams that you were in on, or, imparted on teams that you were in on, and maybe some creative methods that you used when you coached?
Well, I think the first thing is you wanted to get out of the office. You wanted to get out of the gym when you had times where you could go to lunch, you could have a conversation. You didn't want it to be in the work environment, because now it's only just about that work environment. Well, for me, it was basketball. So I think you got to make things fun. I think you got to keep things at times when you have a chance to keep things light. And that's even when you're not successful. You've got to find a way to keep things light. We did the great race when you're at San Francisco. We put guys in groups of teams so they'd get to know each other. And then they had different agendas they had to get done in the city of San Francisco. San Francisco is a great city. It's 7 by 7 miles. So we had different things, different achievements that they had to do without being able to use their cars. They had to figure out how to transport themselves without their own cars. And that was a great team building type of thing for us, and watching our guys really get to know each other and build a bond with each other and build a relationship. I was kind of crazy. I would talk about this really hard practice we were going to have. And then we'd go and get into a bus and we'd go watch a great movie. You know what I mean? Get some popcorn, have some fun. And they would be relieved that today's not a day they're going to be running, 12:33s and running up and down the floor. But again, the car ride is going to be really important to the movie theater and the conversations you have. So you have to do those type of things to make sure that they know you not just as a basketball coach, but as a person, as a human. We would have our players over to the house a lot in San Francisco. Every chance we would get, when we had a recruit coming into town, we would have all of our players come over. We would cook for them. Again, it's about servant leadership. We would cook for them. We would make sure that they had good food. We would make sure they have good drinks and a place to hang their hat. I think those things are really, really important, because again, your amount of time is limited. There's only 24 hours in a day. They get practice for a maximum of 2.5 hours maximum, right? They have school, which can go anywhere from 3 to 4 hours, and they got study hall. So you have to really be smart in organizing your season, right? To figure out, okay, this is where I can do something of that takes them outside of basketball, takes them outside of school, that we can really get to know each other. And you're going to have to pick about 3 or 4 of those opportunities on top of one-on-one conversations, going to lunch, which is, for me, I never did that in college. I never really went to lunch with Coach Williams. I mean, but the world has evolved, it's changed, and these kids have changed now. And you have to, it's either adapt or die in this world. So you're going to have to adapt and spend time to really get to, and the best relationships and the best recruits I ever had are the ones that I really understood them in the recruiting process, right? And then over the course of 1 to 4 years, that I would see things about them, and they would let me into places that they weren't always necessarily comfortable letting me in. And those were the best relationships and guys that I still talk to this day. So and the other one was I got really lucky. I would get really lucky because I didn't have the time to really get to know them as a young man. But over time, I found out that they're about all the right things. And it just made me really value them more. And I think they valued what I brought as well to helping them achieve their goals. But you don't want to be lucky too many times. You want to do the best job you can do to make sure you know who you're bringing into your organization.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's, you've come across so many players on the recruiting trail and guys who have played for you, and thinking about all these different type of activities where you can really get them to be bonding with you and with fellow players. And you talk about service related, leadership, and what, Coach Williams, how he's embodied his life, and how you embody, with all the intangibles and tangibles that you've, acquired and that have been, God given to you to be the best person possible. When you think about, and, this is my last question before we depart from the interview, when you think about, being as a father and a family man, and, raising, your kids, and, how has relationship building in sports really evolved in relationship building within your own family?
Well, it's a challenge every day because they're not just going to listen to what you say, they're going to watch what you do. And so every single day, you're either building equity or you're losing it, quite honestly. So they're going to watch the things that you do, watch how you handle situations. In your toughest times, are you going to be calm and focused and moving on to the next task at hand? I think as a father, you're a coach in so many ways. So they're watching, and you've got to understand that, and you've got to step to the plate every single day and every single minute, and you're going to make mistakes. And I think here's the other thing: when you make mistakes, you got to own up to it. I think that builds a relationship, that this guy knows that, yes, our coach is fallible. He does make mistakes. And every great coach that I played for did that. Coach Williams he would have a curse word, which happened like once every 500 days. He never cursed, but when he did, he would come in right away. He would apologize. After a loss, he would take the heat for the loss. It was always about, how can I make these guys better? And it's the same thing with your kids. How am I going to make them better? And it's not always easy. Like I'm texting my son today, hey, every time your group chats on something, he plays basketball, you got to respond. That's what leadership is. You're not above anything. You're not above everybody. You've got to be about servant leadership all the time. And another great thing I think that on the last question was, Coach Williams always had us working with Special Olympics. We always did stuff in the community service. So our guys, number one, are giving back. Our guys understand how fortunate you are, and our guys understand that it really is bigger than basketball. It's really bigger than them, and we all have a place on this earth that we have to, help those that are around us and become a part of the community. And that again comes back to some leadership.
Well, that's, great final words of wisdom, and, tying it back to, life beyond basketball, and being able to make an impact, not only in the sports world, but also in the business world, and also in the philanthropic world, and giving back to your local communities. Because, I went to high school, and the motto was a higher purpose than self at the Tampa Preparatory School. And that's, something that was instilled, in my, life and growing up, and, with my parents and my older sister. I mean, we all thought about how could we give back to the community, and we did a lot of community service, and, in high school, with Key Club, and, it just is very important for the maturation of our youth. And I hope that with, the generations today and in the future, that they pride themselves on that as well. And, wanting to think beyond just their profession or their daily life, and how they can give back to the local communities. Do you have any final words before we, depart about, relationship building, for our audience?
No, I just appreciate you having me. I think we need to invest in our youth. We need to invest in the people that we're working with. I think that's the number one thing that we have to do to build that relationship, build a trust in each other, that we truly have each other's back and we have a common goal and we can achieve it. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Coach Walters. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. And thanks so much for being a part of the WaveCapital's guest speaker series on relationship building and a team environment. I hope you have a wonderful day. And thank you again for your time. I learned so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. God bless. Take care.